Hi everyone, today I'm going to show you how to add text-to-speech to your Flutter, Android and iOS app. So I'm going to show you how to set the speech rate, volume and pitch and do speak and stop. I'm not going to show you get and set languages today, but if you're wanting that, please let me know, and I'll link in the description the documentation which includes an example for that. So I'm going to first install this Flutter _ text-to-speech package, and to do that I'm going to go to that pubspec.yaml file and just add it as a dependency. Once you save, it's just going to automatically go and install that package, and while it's doing that I'm just going to update my Android manifest to include anything I need to. I'm also going to delete this folder. I'm not going to need the test folder today. I'm not going to be showing anything around tests. So yeah, I'll go to Android and I'll open up the Android manifest. And I'm going to want to include an intent. So I'm just copying and pasting this across here. So I'm just going to include this text-to-speech service for Android and fix up the indentation of my Android manifest. You're also going to want to make sure that you've set the minimum SDK version, so that's just a requirement of the package and it's in the documentation. You'll set it to 21. Once you've got that, you're sort of good to go. You can go ahead and start implementing text-to-speech. So yeah, that's just where it shows you what requirements there are in terms of configuration for Android. For iOS, you don't need to do any configuration for text-to-speech. So if I head over to my main.dart file, I'm just going to clear out a bit of this code because I'm wanting to sort of start from scratch and make it a bit easier for you guys to follow along. I'm also going to import the Flutter text-to-speech package. So if you're not interested in following along with me actually creating the UI and you just sort of want to see towards the end how I am actually going and calling the text-to-speech functionality, then you can skip ahead in the chapters. I'll put them in the description below. So first off, we're just going to have a class which is my app, and it's going to be a stateful widget. So the reason it's stateful is I'm going to have like a little text box that's going to be what is spoken out. And I'm also going to have a button that will either be speak or stop, because you'll be either wanting your text to be spoken, or if it's already being spoken, you'll want it to be stopped. So inside there, I'm going to just override create state, and then I'm going to go ahead and define a class for my app state. So it's inside this class I'm going to actually provide my UI and also have my different state. So first off, because I want to override init state, and I'm going to later call a method that will actually do some state setup for my text-to-speech. But first I'm just going to get that basic UI going. So once again, if you want to skip ahead over this part, go ahead. This is just me setting up a bit of a UI, but a very simple one. So this build function is going to basically build out my app and what it looks like. So I'm going to have a material app, and for that I'm going to want to include a few different things. So I've got my home page and the scaffolding for that. Going to provide a nav bar with a title, or an app bar with a title. This is only going to be a single page application today, so there's not going to be too much to it, but I'm just going to give it a title that says Flutter text-to-speech. Also, sorry if you can hear the building noises in the background. Then I'm just going to have the body of my app, and I'm just going to have a single child scroll view. My UI is going to be very, very simple. It's just really going to be buttons and a text input. And I'm wanting my scroll direction to be vertical, but it should all fit on one page. So as my child, I'm going to have a column. And that's because I want my different UI widgets to display vertically. So the children of that column will be the input and the button at some point. But first I'm just going to go ahead and get that running for you guys so you can sort of see what it looks like at this stage. Flutter's quite good because you get hot reload. My computer is a little bit old at the moment and doesn't necessarily like to run hot reload while I develop, so we'll see how I go, but we might have to sort of exit out of hot reload at some point. So I've run and started my app, and you can see it's there. It's got nothing in it. I'm going to create an enum which is going to store the state of text-to-speech, which will be playing or stopped. There are other states you can handle, but Android only handles playing and stop, so I'm just going to keep it simple for this video. And if you want to handle other states for other sort of devices, you can. I'll link the example provided by the Flutter text-to-speech package in the description. So you can see I've defined a Flutter text-to-speech field, and I'm also defining a string. So the Flutter text-to-speech is what we'll actually set up and call to speak our text, and the string is what's going to be reflected by the text input, and that's what the actual text that we're going to speak. Then we're going to have the state, which is going to default to stopped initially because we'll want to be able to play when we first open the app, and it's going to control which button's showing. So now I'm going to work on initializing my Flutter text-to-speech field. So I'm just creating a new method, init TTS, and I'm going to call it from my init state function. So I'm going to create a new Flutter text-to-speech object, and then from there I can configure it correctly. So there will be a few things that we're wanting to do here. We're going to want to add some handlers and also just await for it to complete setup. We're also configuring it to await speak completion before returning when you do the speak function. So I've made that method async because I am calling async method from inside it and awaiting it. Now I'm going to go set up some different handlers. So I've got my set start handler, which is basically going to be called whenever the text-to-speech starts speaking. So I'm just going to output a little message so I know that it's actually working, and I'm going to set the state. So I'm going to set that text-to-speech state to be equal to playing. This means that the stop playing button will be available when I go ahead and implement that. There are a few other handlers I'm also going to want to implement. So one of those handlers is going to be the stop when the stop happens, and I also want to do completion. Completion is when it stops speaking. So once all the text has been finished speaking. And once I've finished speaking, the state is now stopped because there's no speaking and I want to be able to play more text-to-speech. I'm also going to set a cancel handler. So if the text-to-speech is cancelled for whatever reason, then I'm going to print out cancel, and I'm going to also put that text-to-speech state to stopped. As it will no longer be playing when it's cancelled. And finally, I'm going to want an error handler. So if something goes wrong with text-to-speech, I'm going to want to output an error to the console, and I'm also going to want to set that state to stopped because it's hit some sort of issue. So you'll notice that blue squiggly line under print, and that's just because I am printing and it's warning me that you shouldn't use print in production. So you could use some other sort of logging system so that you can actually get errors that happen on people's devices. But for my purposes of this demo, print to the console is fine. Cool, so now I've set up all my handlers and I've got my Flutter text-to-speech set up. So I can actually go ahead now and start writing some code that will allow me to call that. But first I'm just going to go ahead and clean up my Flutter text-to-speech instance. So basically when dispose is called, I'm going to want to clean up that Flutter text-to-speech instance so it doesn't keep talking. So just call Flutter text-to-speech.stop. So inside this children, I want a new UI element, which is going to be my text input. So I'm going to create a new function here that's going to return a widget. I'm going to call it input. And all that's going to be is just a simple text input. I'm wrapping in a container so I can align it to the top center and give some padding. Then I'm going to provide my child to that container, which is that text field. So the text field is going to have a couple of properties. So the main one's just going to be onChanged. And what that's going to do is I'm going to update the state when it changes. So onChanged will provide you a value, which is what it's changing to. And then from there you can set the state accordingly. So I'll call that set state. And I'll set the underscore TTS that I defined earlier here. That will basically allow me to use that value in calling text to speech later on. So now that I've defined my container, I can just add it to my column. You should see once it reloads a little text input and I can type away in there. So now that we've got a text input, oh yes, and I've just disabled hot reload because my computer was not handling it so well. But anyway, I'll just code up the next part. But once we've got our text input, we're going to want to have some buttons so that we can play whatever text is in that text input. So we're going to check the state, and if the state is equal to stopped, then we're going to want a play button. And if it's not, then we're going to want a stop button. So we're just going to have a simple text button, and on pressed it's going to call a method which I'm going to define. I'm going to call that speak for the play button. And the child of the text button is just going to be a text widget. I'm also just defining my method here. That's going to be the speak method, and it's going to call the Flutter text to speech instance and start speaking. It's also going to do all my setup of different things like pitch and volume. So yeah, here I'll give the text that I want to show as my button, which is play. I'm just going to copy that because I'm going to want an almost identical button for stop. The only difference is I'll be calling a different function, which is stop, and the text will be stop. So once again, I'm just going to create another method here, which will be the stop method. And that's just going to go ahead and stop the speech. So now I'm going to go ahead and implement my ability to speak. So I'm just going to await the Flutter text to speech. And I'm going to go ahead and set some different things. So I'm going to set the volume, which is going to be 1. I'm going to set the pitch, and I'm also going to set the pace. So this is the pace here. And it's actually worth noting that the demo app that Flutter Text-to-Speech provides in their Git repo has slider bars for that. So if you're interested in implementing some sort of control that the user has control over, then that might be useful for you. I've personally found in my own experience that when I'm using text-to-speech, I like to have control over the speech rate and pitch, just because then you can make it sound better and be better for your actual application. So basically here I'm just checking whether the text-to-speech is not empty, because we don't want to bother trying to speak if it's empty. There'll be nothing to say. And then we just go speak and we pass in the text. So we can get that from that text-to-speech field there. We're using that exclamation mark because it was optional. Then we're going to go do something very similar with stop. So we're just going to go Flutter text-to-speech. .stop. And we're going to get a result back from that, which tells us whether it was successful or not. And it will be successful if the result is equal to 1, in which case we're going to want to set the state to say that the text-to-speech state is now stopped. That will allow our play button to show again, and from there we will be able to use text-to-speech again. So now we're just going to display those buttons on screen. And I'm going to go ahead and run my application. So it's going to take a little while to launch because, like I said, I closed it down a bit earlier. But once it launches, I can start typing.
Hi there, this is my text-to-speech tutorial. Hi there. Hi there, this is my text-to-speech tutorial.
And you would have seen you can stop it at any point. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial today. If you have, please like and subscribe for more content. All my code will be available on GitHub.